Hello everyone, welcome back to the 5 Minute Tech channel. Today we will be talking about migrating monoliths to microservices and what are the practical strategies which we can follow to do the migration. The practical strategies for transitioning from my monolith and to microservice will be architecture is what I'll be talking about, and with the key consideration and actionable steps for completing a successful migration. So let's get started. So why move from a monolith? So there are certain scenarios which we come across, wherein one of the scenario is your monolith application is slowing you down and making a development a nightmare and costing a fortune to maintain the single monolith huge application. So many organizations face the same struggle, but there is a powerful solution which is microservices. And in this video, I'll be diving deep with you on the practical and actionable strategies which we can take to break free from your monolith constraints and successfully migrate to a flexible, scalable microservice architecture. Also, there are other problems like we will be grappling with daunting task of migrating your monolith system to microservice, unsure where to begin and how to do the completion. So the hype around microservice is actually quite real, and how often we get lost in getting those translations done. So we are going to cut through the noise and to give you the exact strategy which you can follow for and do some critical consideration to confidently embark on this migration from the monolith architecture to the microservice architecture. So let's dive deep into it now. So first of all, let's understand what is the difference between the monolith and microservice. Monolith design is more of a single unified structure, and a microservice is more disassembled into smaller independent units or services. Development wise, the monolith is simple, all functions managed in one repo or space, as you can call it. And microservice is modular. Each service handles specific functions independently, and they have their own repositories where you can check in the code and maintain it. Deployment as a single unit for the monolith, whereas microservices can be deployed independently. And then debugging is easier to debug in a monolith, as everything is there together and it operates as a single unit. Whereas for microservices, it's a little more complex because you need to navigate through different the connection areas, connection points between different services. Monolith modification changes the entire stack, and it is quite cumbersome to make small changes as well, whereas in microservices the changes can be made to individual services without affecting any other service. Investment wise, lower investment for monolith and simpler infrastructure, whereas for microservices there are higher initial investment. You have to invest in all the services, so deployment and maintenance, and also offers scalability, but it offers scalability and flexibility benefit in the long run. So this is the simple application which we'll be talking about. We will have a ShopSphere monolith application where we have the views, controllers, models and services in place. It is directly talking with the database to the service layer, which has the entity framework ORM, and it is relaying it via the models to the controller, and from there it will go to the UI. We'll be talking about the Swagger UI as well, wherein we'll be showing we'll be talking about how the APIs are present in the monolith application, and then following the different patterns like your strangler fig pattern, event driven architecture, and the saga pattern, along with the service discovery, API gateway and backend for front-end pattern. We will be migrating the application to the microservices, and those services will be servicing the UI through the API gateway, and will have a message queue at the backend to help assist in navigating to different modules of the application. So what are the common migration patterns? As we just saw, the strangler fig pattern, which is incrementally we replace the parts of monolith and cut it off, whereas the API gateway, we have already dealt in depth in this channel about how to configure the API gateway, which will be a unified entry point route to new services versus the legacy. So we will reroute the services. Database per service, we reduce the coupling. Each service owns its own schema and the database so that it can manage its independent deployment. And then we have the event driven decomposition where we publish domain events when state changes. For example, your order created, so that is like an event. And then we have the saga or orchestration where we manage distributed transactions by choreography or orchestration where are different steps and they follow each other, and then it completes the saga. Now, decomposition strategies which we'll be taking to decompose a monolith to a microservice will be like business capability. We need to identify the core domains, which are the main areas or the implementation modules. So, for example, ordering, payment, shipping, notification in the shopping context. And then we will have the bounded context wherein we align the service boundaries with the domain driven design context. For example, what is a specific bounded context in which we can define a specific service which can live independently of each other and also can be deployed and maintained independently. Then we have the data ownership. Services own its own persistence or database and avoid direct cross-service DB queries, and they can talk to each other through the events, or we talked about the event-driven messages and all those things. And then there is an anti-corruption layer, the adapters around the legacy part of the to normalize the contract. So till we are still working with the older services, we will need certain anti-corruption layer. And then we reuse versus rewrite. We decide per module. Some modules may remain in monolith longer, whereas some will be something which can be easily replaced. Now this is the project structure which we will be working with. The monolith has different order, payment and shipping services along with the DTOs and the entities, and it is having the controllers through which it will render the APIs for the application to consume. Whereas in microservice, which we will be having different services like order service, payment service and the shipping service, and each of these service will have its own DB context, and along with that the controllers, DTOs and the entity layer. So let's get started on a practical demo on how we will migrate this application. So here we have a monolith application. The application is a web app API project which has everything bundled into the same project file. So we have orders, payment and shipment with all these layers starting from services, entities and the controllers in one project. So whenever there is any change that is needed on this project, for example, if I want to add a new API for the shipping controller, I will have to deploy the entire application, the monolith application, so that everything gets deployed, and then this API has an additional API to be used by the application. So this causes a overhead. So what we will go ahead and do now is to break this into 3 small web API projects which can be independently be deployed. So we will create orders, payments and shipping services separately. So let's do that now. To do that, we'll first add a blank solution. So new project, and we'll select the blank solution, and in the blank solution we will be mentioning monolith to microservices. We'll go ahead and save this project. We'll go ahead and add the monolith application here. So we have added the monolith application here. Now we'll go ahead and add 3 different services, 3 different APIs: orders, payment and shipment. I've added the order service, and this will have a code specific to orders part. And now we'll go ahead and add the payment service. So here we have the payment service. Now we'll go ahead and add the third service, which is the shipping service. So we'll go ahead and add a new project, and we'll select the ASP.NET Core Web API and do a shipping service. Now all our services are ready. I'll remove the boilerplate code, and we'll go ahead and add the controllers in all the 3 services. Before adding the code, we'll add the dependencies, and we will be adding the EF core dependencies which we'll be using. So right now in dependencies we have only Swashbuckle. We'll go ahead and add the entity framework dependencies here, something which is similar to what we have in here. So it's SQL Server and tools. So let me go ahead and add that. So SQL Server, there we are. We'll install the SQL Server, and this will do for all the 3 projects, and the EF code tools. EF code tools. So we have added the references, the nuggets for all the projects. We'll go ahead and add the controller for the order service. So we have added all the layers in the order service. To begin with, we have orders controller, which calls the orders DB context, which is connected to the orders data table, and in between we have the model, which is the one which replicates the database, and also we have orders DTO for getting the data back to the API or the UI. So this is the setup of the order service, which is an extraction of what we had in models, monoliths, and that is extracted into a separate service. Now we'll go ahead and create the database for this. So let me run the migration for the specific project, and I'll go ahead and first select that specific project which I want to do the migration for. So I've launched the PowerShell here, and I'll go ahead and do the initial create, and it should build and create the database. Now I'll go ahead and update the database. Okay, let's go and verify if the database is created here. So I'll go ahead in the database, and you should be able to see the order database, order DB. Now we'll go ahead and create the same way we will create the payment and the shipping service layers. Similarly, we have added the layers for payment service, payment controller, payment DB context, the models, and the basic app setting file. And similarly for shipping service also, we have added shipping controller, shipping DB context, and the supporting models for the service, and then whatever plugin we need for program.cs, and also for the app setting file, which is my local database. I'll go ahead and explore the project and run the migration here as well for shipping and for the payment service. So initial create, and then we will go ahead and generate the database. Database update. This is done. We will go ahead to the payment service now. Here also we will run the same commands. Migration, initial create, followed by the database creation. Let's update. And as you see, the database has been created. Now let's go ahead and refresh the server and see if we are able to get all the 3 databases. And yes, we are having the 3 databases now. Now let's run the monolith application and see how our behavior was. So I'll set this as a startup project and run this, and then we will run the individual application for the microservices which we have created. So this is running on 5290. So let me run this one in the browser. So this is loaded, and if you see here, we will be able to create in the monolith data. So test user 1, and probably a total of 10, and when I execute it, you should be able to see the data being generated or created. We can fetch the ID 3 also by going to get orders and try it out and put the ID 3, and then we can execute it, and we will be able to get the data back. So this is how the monolith is working. Now we'll see the similar implementation in the microservice. So we have selected multiple startup project as order service, payment service and shipping service. We'll apply yes, okay, and then we will start this. I've started all the 3 applications and it will be loading in shortly. So as you see, 5001 is the order service, 5002 is the payment service, and 5003 is the shipping service. Now we will go ahead and trigger the same way the order service, like a test user 1 and maybe a 10, and execute it. So we have an error wherein we need to bind the HTTP client factory, and we have missed to add the services as HTTP client, and that's what was breaking. We'll just run this again now. It's coming up now again. We'll go ahead and refresh and check the application now. And we should be able to get the data, and here it is, order ID 1 and total 10. And if we go ahead and check the database, so let's go to the database and open the orders DB table and view the data. We should be able to see the test user 1 10. So this is how you will migrate a monolith application piece by piece into small areas, defining the bounded context, and then generating the individual service which can be independently deployed, maintained and developed by different teams. I have showcased to one technical stack, but these can be developed into different stack and extracted out of the monolith. So this was all about migration from monolith to microservice strategies and implementation. Hope you like the video. If you like, press like and subscribe to the channel. Have a nice day.